Good afternoon, everyone. And fun.
We are raising our guidance.
Great success, success, success. Great success, success, success means great profit, great profit, great profit. Mediocre success still means profit. Good afternoon, everyone. Still means profit. Still means good afternoon, everyone. Profit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Live TV Ratings Talk. I'm Brandon Thurston, broadcasting live from Buffalo, New York, home of WWE's house show tonight at, what's the name of the venue? KeyBank Arena. Over 13,000 in capacity tonight for the house show, reportedly. But we're not going to talk about ticket sales or attendance. We are here, of course, to talk about TV ratings. And the latest is that AEW Dynamite on TNT was watched last night by 975,000 viewers, down slightly from last week in total viewership, but up very slightly in the demo. 485,000 viewers between the ages of 18 to 49, a 0.37 demo rating, equal to last week. The same demo rating, slightly up in the measurement of actual viewers in the demo. We'll talk about Raw. We'll talk about Smackdown as well. We'll talk about NXT. A little bit about Rampage. And we'll look at some year-over-year trends. We will do the deepest AEW and WWE TV ratings comparisons that I can do that are meaningful. And maybe we'll talk about what really matters when it comes to popularity, trying to read what TV ratings might tell us about popularity is one thing. Trying to read what TV ratings tell us about TV rights value is a different thing. And we will look at which metrics to look at when considering those two different questions. But let's talk about Dynamite. By the way, we're going to talk about the West Coast issue as well. But Dynamite now, after a lull in throughout November, really, Dynamite is doing a 0.37 for the second week in a row. It had last done a 0.37 or better on November 17th. And the 2 weeks before that, it was under 3.7 with a 3.4 and a 3.3 in early November. After having this really hot period in September and August, coming off of the debuts of CM Punk and Bryan Danielson. Meanwhile, Rampage has been settling into whatever its number is going to be. Rampage was preempted to Christmas night this week on a Saturday instead of a Friday because of a Christmas story that had to air in its time slot on TNT. But Rampage doing even better in the Saturday night, 9 p.m. It's a little bit earlier and it's a Saturday. But at 9 p.m. on a Saturday, doing better than it's done in weeks for Rampage. 589,000 viewers, a 0.26 in the demo. The last time Rampage did that well in the demo was September 24th, when it did a 0.29 in the demo in that hot month of September for AEW. So people may be thinking about whether or not, Rampage should just go to Saturday. Maybe I haven't put a lot of thought into what else is on Saturday for Dynamite. It might be nothing, but Rampage doing far better ratings. Well, not far, considerably. I mean, it was up only slightly in total viewership from the prior week, which the prior week was a bounce back from 3 straight weeks here where it was near or below 500,000. Last week, the last time it was in its normal time slot on Friday night at 10, it did 571,000 viewers, 306,000 in the demo. And this was up slightly from that. So maybe Saturday is a better time slot. Maybe it had something to do with Christmas night being a decent night for people to get together and watch TV together. It's worth noting that this was, if we look at the median viewership chart, the median age viewership for this Rampage was exceptionally low. 43 years old. As people may know, there are all different profiles of median age depending on which wrestling program you're talking about. Yes, NXT a couple weeks ago did a 64-year-old was the median viewer for NXT 2 weeks ago. This week, 59, a little bit younger. Raw and SmackDown, right in the middle of the 50s. Dynamite, in the late 40s. Rampage is usually a little bit younger, in the mid to late 40s, 45, 46, 48. But it did a 43. The only number that comes close to this, is when it was 43 on August 20th, 2021, the second episode ever of Rampage. That is the CM Punk debut episode. And in fact, by some decimal points, they both round to 43. But if you look at the decimal, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but this episode was even a little bit younger, which suggests to me a theory. We'll talk more about theories in a moment, but which suggests to me a theory that maybe there was a wide variety of people, age groups, family members perhaps, watching television together on this instance, more so than usual, that drove the median age down a bit and may have accounted for the increase in viewership for Rampage. Now, that's AEW. I don't see a ton of big stories to take away from this episode of Dynamite. It was another decent week after a pretty not good lull of what's really from about November 3rd for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks here, where it did no better than a 0.34. It did do a 0.37 on the 17th, but where it's mostly done in the lower half of the 0.30s for a demo rating, where it's done well under 1 million viewers for the most part, in some instances in the 800,000 viewer range. The prevailing theory for why that might have been the case is that beginning on October 27th, Dynamite began to air out of prime time on the West Coast, on the Pacific, in the Pacific time zone, and in the Mountain time zone. No longer airing at 8 p.m., but rather airing at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. in those areas. Live, but live maybe not necessarily beneficial, but we'll look into that. But you can, I believe this is the 7 weeks before and the 7 weeks after. Don't worry, we're not counting the 2 weeks where it was preempted to Saturday here. We're only looking at normal time slots here. But there was a 23% decline in viewership beginning with the NHL season. Both in total viewership and the demo, pretty similar. The prevailing theory is that the West Coast, Dynamite not airing in the West Coast in its normal time slot in prime time, where people are used to watching TV and everybody's home or whatever, that's hurting the show. If we look at some data, that sounded like a good idea, but if we look at some data, at least this data that I have to look at doesn't support that. In the 6 weeks before the NHL season started, not counting the 2 preemption weeks, in the 6 weeks after the NHL season started, we see, yes, the Pacific time zone. This is based on a sampling of markets in these regions. I should note, this is not an absolute entire measurement of all the population in these areas, but a sampling of markets. Down 31% in the Pacific time zone. That sounds pretty bad. Down 27% in the Mountain time zone. That sounds pretty bad too. Central time zone down 9%, so not as bad. Central time zone holding up. That so far, we're supporting an argument that yes, those two Western Coast, those two Western time zones are being hurt worse in these 6 weeks versus the 6 weeks before it. But then you look at the Eastern time zone, which I'm almost certain has the most samples here. That's down 30%. Again, Pacific down 31%, Mountain down 27%. The Eastern time zone down 30% by the same degree as the Pacific time zone. Very similar to the Mountain time zone. And we can look at the samples that we have across the country here, just to get an idea. So we even see in Hangman Page's home state of North Carolina, down 45% in the 6 weeks after the NHL season versus the 6 weeks prior. A few markets are up, but most of them are down. So there's that. I guess takeaway is that, well, let's look at this difference again. That maybe the negative trend in viewership for Dynamite had less to do with the shift in the West Coast and when they're able to view the show, and maybe it had more to do with the content. Maybe it had something to do with who was on the TV show, or really who wasn't. This has been a period where largely Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega have not appeared on the program for various reasons. So maybe that's a factor. Well, so we can, though, look at how did Dynamite do in this week versus the other programs in the wrestling world for United States viewership. Raw did beat Dynamite in the demo this week by 10%. Dynamite did edge out Raw, though, in men 18 to 49 by 16%. That is an actual difference in terms of viewers of 321,000 for Dynamite, 276,000 for Raw. In the older half of the key demo, Raw ahead in the younger half of the key demo by 42%, but in the older half of the key demo, Dynamite just barely edging out Raw by 3%. Overwhelmingly, that is driven by the men in the audience in that age group, 35 to 49, which is probably, as far as one of these gender groups here, is the largest subset demo, down ballot demo, if you will. Up by 22%. Again, what is that in terms of actual viewers? We've got 239 watching Dynamite, and just under 200,000, 196 for Raw. The female group, though, far bigger for Raw than it is for Dynamite. 148 to 113, the latter, is Dynamite. So there's that. It's interesting. This is the second week in a row, I believe, where Rampage, for what it's worth, this is a smaller demo than the rest, but women 18 to 34, the younger half of the key demo, women in that younger half of the key demo, Rampage actually had a slightly larger audience than Dynamite by 8%, for whatever that's worth. It's a 28% edge in the men's side of that. Men 18 to 34, 28% larger audience for Dynamite, the most recent Dynamite versus the most recent Rampage, I should say. Technically, Rampage was Saturday last week. So that's that. The most recent episode of Smackdown, yes, Dynamite did have a larger men 35 to 49 audience, but that was a Smackdown that was on Christmas Eve. That did a lower rating than usual, but still pretty good for a Christmas Eve episode of Smackdown. We'll talk about Raw. Raw did a .41 in the demo, which is better than it's done in about in exactly 4 weeks, since it did a .45. Can you believe that? From November 29th to the following week, December 6th, Raw dropped by 10 points. I had not noticed that until now. It dropped by 10 points between 1 week. But yes, this number was back over the .40 threshold. It was at almost 1.6 million viewers, 1.592. That's 1 million. 592,000 viewers total. It ranked number 6. The best demo it's done in 4 weeks since the very end of November. And why? Well, maybe the hours that Nielsen gives us, because we are gifted with Raw being listed not in 1 row, not in 2 rows, but in 3 rows, because it's WWE entertainment. So we get the 3-hour breakdown every week, and the 10 o'clock hour, which is usually the least viewed, was not the least viewed this week. In terms of total viewers, actually, it was the least viewed. But in the demo, it was more highly viewed than the first hour. Hour 3, the 10 o'clock hour, did a 0.41. Hour 1 did a 0.39. Hour 2 was the most viewed, both in terms of total viewership and the demo. Did a 0.43 in the demo. But hour 3 brought some people, brought people in more so than the first hour did for whatever reason. Maybe it had to do with the wedding, the Miz and Maurice wedding, interrupted by Edge with his black blood in the final segment of Raw. Maybe that's it. I don't have quarter hours or anything like that to shed more light on that. But unusually, the 10 o'clock hour was up in the demo, or at least it wasn't up from the prior hour, but it was up from the 8 o'clock hour. And normally, the 10 o'clock hour is the least viewed. So there's that. By the way, if you have a question or if you want to make a comment, you can do a super chat. And we'll talk about Smackdown. Smackdown on Christmas Eve doing almost 2 million viewers in the demo. 1,972,000. Holding up with a 0.48 in the demo. So even though it was on Christmas Eve, still the most watched wrestling program within the last 7 days. Even beyond that, I suppose, despite being on Christmas Eve. It's benefited, of course, by being on broadcast, but there you go. So not much to derive here, other than you could make the argument, especially if you're trying to sell a WTV deal, that, hey, look, our audience is so loyal that they're even watching us on Christmas Eve for the most part. In a week-over-week difference, in fact, what kind of decline was that? Or I guess we could look at the median of the last 4 too, to get an idea of like how much retention did they actually achieve on Christmas Eve. Now, total audience was down 14%. Demo was down less by 18%. But if we look at the median of the last 4, because maybe that's comparing more of a normal performance versus what this week did, or this most recent episode did, down 8 total, down 7 in the demo. So you could spin it as more than 90% of our audience stuck with us on Christmas Eve. You want to be with your family on Christmas Eve? No, they want to watch Smackdown and acknowledge him. Roman Reigns is their family. They're in the bloodline. Anyway, Smackdown holding up well. NXT did its best rating, did a 662,000 viewers, and I have to look up all the way back to the Halloween Havoc episode that did 746,000 viewers to find an episode as highly viewed as that, which also did a 0.18 in the demo. This did a 0.16 in the demo. People, I can think of some jokes here where, well, maybe, the families were together, the old folks who usually watch NXT with fewer people or alone were joined by their younger family members. And the median age was down slightly. It's down. In fact, it was down by about 5 years. Right? If we look back at the median age chart and look at what this week was, it was a 59 compared to the 64 that it was last week. So NXT doing better than normal. We'll see if it holds up in the following week. Maybe when families aren't together so much. NXT, as usual, was more highly viewed in terms of total viewers than Rampage was. 12% margin for NXT. But Rampage beat NXT in the demo by 59%. This is comparing Saturday to Tuesday. So not in the same week, but in terms of the most recent episode. And of course, NXT nearly doubling Rampage in P50+. So there you go. The most interesting story to me this year has been watching the changes in the wrestling TV landscape that I think is pretty well illustrated by this chart that we have on the screen right now, which shows basically the question is, in each given week, from the beginning of Dynamite's debut to the present, in each of those weeks, what was the margin that WWE shows Raw and SmackDown? How much did they beat Raw by? I know people get upset when I say beat, and I talk about it as a competition, even though they're not on the same night. But how much did Raw and SmackDown have a larger audience in the demo in the same week versus Dynamite? And early on in the history of Dynamite, that difference is 100% or more, especially if you're SmackDown. Sometimes you're as high as you got 150% margin, so that means you're doubling Dynamite in the demo and then some. Remember, Dynamite is going against NXT at this time, which may be taking a bite out of what Dynamite might be able to achieve otherwise. But nonetheless, Raw and SmackDown have a pretty wide margin over what Dynamite is doing. As 2020 comes to a close in December, really, I guess it's really peaking in September here. For whatever reason, there's this decline in the margin for Raw and SmackDown throughout the summer, when really, I guess, we're in the height of the PC era. That really did hurt Raw and SmackDown's ratings more so than it hurt more so than NXT ratings and Dynamite ratings were hurt during that period, which was a talking point for me, and it led to a lot of questions being asked about TV ratings of all things during earnings calls, in WWE's quarterly earnings calls. A lot of pressure on WWE to do something about their ratings in the summer of 2020. Thus, the Thunderdome was introduced. I believe the episode right after SummerSlam in 2020. Roman Reigns also came back, appearing on SmackDown. And through the fall, despite Raw going against Monday Night Football, the margin grew. Definitely grew for SmackDown, grew somewhat for Raw in this era where they had the Thunderdome and they had lots of noise and sound effects and things of that nature, rather than wrestling in the absolute silence of the PC, or I know they did have like some NXT people, trainees and so forth, pretending to be crowd members. But then into December, it fell a little bit, and AEW had a strong December 2020. But anyway, finally we get to 2021. And in the beginning of 2021, Wednesday Night War still lasting for a few more months. Raw and SmackDown not quite holding a 100% margin in P18 to 49 over Dynamite, but pretty close in most weeks. In some weeks, SmackDown did have a 100% margin in P18 to 49. In what looks like the very first week of 2021, which might have been a Legends episode, Raw had a more than 150% margin over Dynamite. But as the year went on, and after those preemptions happened due to, I believe, the NBA playoffs throughout late May to late June, Dynamite came back, and the margin, not just for Raw, but for SmackDown too, was down to 50%. Sometimes a little bit over 50%, but often less than 50%. And of course, in September, in terms of live and same day, on two occasions, one week it was not against Monday Night Football for Raw, but against college football for Raw. Dynamite had a slightly larger P18 to 49 audience. And then again the following week when Raw went against the first week of Monday Night Football. Dynamite led in the same week again in 18 to 49 audience. Now, as we've discussed and I guess reported here, if you look at the DVR viewership, Raw did regain its lead when you count the live plus 7. Raw had a larger audience if you include the DVR viewership in those weeks. So, if you count DVR viewership, in all likelihood, I don't know that I don't have all of the data I don't think. But if you count the DVR viewership, in all likelihood, Raw has never lost in the same week to Dynamite in 18 to 49. Total viewership is a totally different story with a much larger margin for the W programs, of course. But we're seeing SmackDown now. Looking, and this is the trend line that I have drawn over this is, I believe, a 13-week moving average. So, but we are seeing SmackDown open up its lead a bit. You could argue SmackDown strengthening, doing better ratings in the last few months. But Raw sort of just holding steady in the last couple of weeks. The margin getting lower as Dynamite ratings have gotten a little bit better in these last 2 weeks. So that's to me, a very interesting story because it signals in 18 to 49, which is the most important measurement in television viewership, at least for these programs. Fox News may be something different, maybe P50 plus, but for these programs, P18 to 49, we're seeing who's able in a given week to capture the largest audience in that important ad demo. And it's always the W programs, especially if we add in DVR viewership, but that margin is getting smaller. You might even say it's trending downward. And Dynamite in this year, 2021, has been benefited by the end of the Wednesday Night War, no longer having to go head-to-head with NXT, which has coincided with some increase in its viewership. Also, the addition of CM Punk and Bryan Danielson are very notable. As I mentioned earlier already, a really strong September and late August for AEW ratings. But something to watch for in the future to see who's able to attract the largest key demo audience in the future. So there's that. We can talk too about, as it's really hard, right, to understand what any of these TV ratings mean in this environment where, as people know, all TV is down. So if all TV is down, how bad do ratings really need to be in order for us to tell whether they actually are bad, or what is a good rating? Maybe slightly down is a good rating. Maybe down really, really bad is finally a bad rating. Or what's a middle of the road rating in this environment? And there's some data out there that we can look at. There's different ways we can slice this. There's no perfect one metric that I've found anyway that perfectly answers that question. But we can probably come up with a preponderance of examples to show and to compare them against the performance of wrestling programs to get an idea. So what I've got on the screen here is the 18 to 49 viewership, the year-over-year change for the top 50, calculated daily, the top 50 non-news cable originals. Why do you exclude news? Because if we included news, it would look more stable, especially with the year of 2020 involved and the Trump presidency and the performance of viewership that the cable news channels did. I think that throws this off. So, and when I say non-news, I mean I excluded the three networks, the three major cable networks: Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC. So how much are the top 50 non-news cable originals down in 2021? And now we have this data. Only 3 more days, I guess 2 more days left to go in terms of data. I might not have updated this for yesterday's data, but it's probably not going to change. I believe I'm using a median here to minimize any really high performances or something like that. In this case, it would. Anyway, top 50 non-news cable originals are down 16% year over year. And it's been in that neighborhood in years prior. It was down 24% last year. It was down 14% in 2019. It was down 12% in 2018. It was down 9% in 2017. So down 16% in 2021. You might say that, okay, down 16%. If you're doing worse than a negative 16% difference, maybe your viewership is suffering in a genuine way. So we lay now, brace yourself. Now we're going to lay on top of this chart the year-over-year differences for the major W and AEW wrestling programs. Boom. And there we go. And all of them do better then negative 16%. The closest is NXT with negative 14%. So 2 percentage points better than the median of the top 50 cable originals, non-news. SmackDown, negative 8%. Raw, negative 12%. I think that data point should be a little bit lower on the chart there. But I do believe that number is correct. Negative 12% for Raw. So still better than perhaps the trend of cable generally. And Dynamite up 8%. Dynamite is benefited by the lack of NXT competition, benefited by the addition of new talent. If we look back, we do see Raw and NXT in 2020. I'm not sure that that's a fair comparison for NXT, but it is for Raw, pandemic notwithstanding. That Raw was down 29% year over year in 2020 to top 50 non-news cable originals, down 24%. And then in 2019 even, if we say, well, maybe we throw that away, dismiss it, discount it, because they were in the PC and the Thunderdome for most of that year. Okay, we look at 2019. Raw was down 17% year over year, median viewership. Top 50 non-news cable originals were down 14%, so Raw was a little bit worse. SmackDown was down only 8%, down only 12%. SmackDown has been benefited by moving around in this timeline only in 2020, and 2019, I suppose, as well, where we don't have entire years with a like-to-like comparison for SmackDown on the same network, same time slot. SmackDown has been benefited by being on Fox, on broadcast, with stronger reach than it was when it was previously on the USA Network. But we do have, I suppose, in the 2018 comparison, where it was down 8%, compared to the top 50 non-news cable originals down 12%. So there's that. I know I've got some data points that are not in the right place, but I do believe that the numbers represented are correct. So that's one way of finding some sort of baseline to normalize all TV is down. So what's all TV? How down? How down is all TV? It's down double digits. What are some other examples? That's top 50 non-news cable originals. Let's say I don't like that. I don't know why only cable originals, because that's what Showbiz Daily has available. Why non-news? Maybe I want to look at something else here. So Variety had this wonderful article today, which I think they publish a version of every year, showing the top-rated networks of the year, both in terms of total viewership and 18 to 49. I chose to focus on 18 to 49. So if you want to look at total viewership, you can look at Variety's article today. And what I've got highlighted here is, here's the year-over-year change for Fox, which, by the way, is the number 2 network in the demo. Fox down 21%. So Fox down 21%. How much was SmackDown down? Only 8%. So by that comparison, SmackDown doing much better than Fox generally. TNT up 6%. Up 6%. TNT largely driven by the NBA. Only a little bit carrying the NHL in this year, but up 6%. What did Dynamite do again? Up 8%. So Dynamite slightly outperforming that positive year-over-year difference for TNT, which I believe is TNT. Oh, CBS is up 1%. NBC was up 7%. But most of these year-over-year differences are negative, many of them by double digits. TBS, Dynamite's future home, beginning next week, down 11% year-over-year. USA Network, down 12%. What did NXT and Raw do? Programs that are aired on the USA Network, USA down 12%. USA down 12%. Raw down 12%. Raw is by far the most watched show on USA Network, for what it's worth, and NXT down 14%. So NXT doing a little bit worse than the USA Network generally. I imagine that they're including, and I mean we could look at the Variety article to find out what exactly they're referring to here. I would imagine they're looking at everything on the network, the entire 24 hours of the year, but they're probably including reruns and things like that. Anyway, the average change of all the top 50 networks, the average change was -12. The median change, to minimize maybe the obscuring effect of especially high performers, especially low performers, was 16%. So, did everybody do better than? It's the same as my top 50 non-news cable, by the way. Everybody did at least a little bit better than -16%. Even NXT only did a -14%. So, wrestling holding up pretty well in 2021, I would say. Dynamite performing the best, advantaged by a lack of NXT in most of the year. NXT performing the weakest. Smackdown performing better than Raw. And Raw in the middle between Smackdown and NXT would be my takeaway. I'm hesitant to say nobody did genuinely bad, but NXT is not a valuable property like it probably wanted to be. We can also look at, I took some time here. We're probably just going to speed through this, though. I did take some time here to go through the Showbiz Daily data and look at the year-over-year changes for the 4 networks that are going to house wrestling programming in 2022. So I included TBS here. Fox, TBS, TNT, and USA. No, I didn't include Access here because Access has, if you're wondering about Impact, the only programs that appear in the top 50 cable originals that I've ever seen for Access are sometimes Impact. On one occasion, was something called The Year in Music, and that's it. Impact, in other words, Impact is probably Access's most watched program by far. Anyway, and we're not looking at Rampage here because Rampage doesn't have a full year to compare itself against in the prior year. But we can see here that I took the top 100 telecasts, and after looking at what we just looked at, this looks sort of not as good of a comparison. We see a lot of positive deltas here, with TBS up 68% in the demo, 88% in total viewership, 74% in 18 to 34. So I'm sort of, I don't know. I don't know this is the greatest comparison considering I decided arbitrarily to cut it off at 100. So I don't know. We'll skip this. I've already been talking for 37 minutes here. So that's what were we considering there? Sort of that tells us something about value, economic value of these programs. Probably tells us as much about the popularity of the programs. I think in these years of 2019 and 2020 that Raw doing worse than this measurement for cable suggests to me that Raw became a genuinely less popular program. That these were genuinely bad ratings for Raw, doing okay in this year, despite it doing its lowest 18 to 49 ever, and it'll probably break that record a number of times next year. But anyway, this might tell us something about popularity, about the relative popularity of these wrestling programs. But what about TV rights fees? As we know, the strongest force in all of the wrestling industry is TV rights fees in the U.S. And I think rank is the number that tells us the most about that. And as I was talking to my friends at the PWI podcast yesterday, yes, you can talk about how Raw has been down every year by double digits in most years in terms of a percent. But if you look at the ranking, this is the Showbiz Daily, P18 to 49 daily cable ranking. I take the median for each year from 2015 to this year. And we don't see a negative decline for Raw or for SmackDown. Raw in 2015 had a median rank on Monday among cable originals of number 3. The following year, it was number 4. In 2017, it was number 3. 2018 was number 3. 2019 was number 3. 2020, in the year of the pandemic, first year of the pandemic, did a little worse, number 4. And this year, 2021, it didn't do worse. It did better. It did better, in fact, than any number I've got up here on the chart since 2015. Number 2, Raw improved its rank in the year that it was twice beaten by Dynamite in the demo in the year that it did its lowest demo ratings ever. It was, on a median basis, the second most watched program in the demo on cable among original programs. All of these caveats here because that's what Showbiz Daily reports. They don't report reruns. For the most part, original programs are the most watched programs on cable, with some exceptions. How did Dynamite do? Dynamite did a median rank of number 4 on the Showbiz list. Last year it was number 9. In the few months of 2018, it was number 8. And NXT, its median rank in this year is 28. That's better than last year, where it was 37 for a median rank. And in the few months of NXT in 2019 on the USA Network, it was number 21. What does any of this tell? And by the way, you probably want to know about Smackdown, so don't worry, I've got it ready. Smackdown has not been on cable since late 2019. And when it was a number 4 in 2015, number 3 in 2016, and then 3 straight years of being number 2 on its day in the demo among cable originals. And now, this year, among all TV, this is cable and broadcast primetime in the same bucket, cable originals and broadcast primetime all together. In 2020, its median rank was number 2. In 2021, its median rank, again, in the demo, unchanged, number 2. So what does this tell me? What does this tell us? It tells us about, I think, what a network, roughly, what a network should pay, just what sort of realm you live in terms of TV rights fees. And what I get from this is that, first of all, I believe that your TV rights value is largely based on your performance compared to programming generally. Yes, I can make a chart that shows Raw down and to the right for years and years and years, and it looks terrible. But as we know, in 2018, WWE signed a deal that more than tripled its TV rights fees, despite all of that down and to the right trend. The top 5 or so, maybe even the top 10 or so programs, I think are highly valuable. Once you get below the top 10 or so, certainly into the lower 20s, even 30s, where NXT often is, that's where I think your program is not as valuable. So I think Dynamite's in a good position here. NXT, not in a great position. As I've pointed out, it's doing ratings now that are comparable to what Law & Order does in a similar time slot. Those are reruns of Law & Order. But Raw still number 2 on its night among cable originals. SmackDown, number 2 on its night among all TV. So I think these programs, based on their rank, are still highly valuable to networks. And I think they're still in a good position, despite whatever you can say about the quality of the content, are still in a good position to demand millions and millions of dollars for their rights fees. So I think that's most of what I needed to say here. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments. Again, you can use the super chat feature. But I guess we can take one last look at, and I think this is up to date too. This is looking at sort of the watch time, the breakdown of watch time. And if you think about wrestling viewership as a total pie, it's not a pie chart, but as a bar, not a pie, but I guess a candy bar of viewership. Raw, with its 3 hours, is producing 38% of that watch time. SmackDown, with its 2 hours, I'm looking at 1849, by the way. Raw is producing 38% of the watch time. This is based on the past month's viewership. So looking at what are they really doing recently, not necessarily back in the whole year. SmackDown producing about a third of that viewership, 34%. Dynamite producing about 22% with its 2 hours. And Rampage, another 6%. So if you add up the AEW programs, you get to 28%. If you add up the the WWE programs. Those are big numbers, so I need a calculator. To add 34 to 38, 72%. However, WWE is taking in way more than 72% of the TV rights fees. So if we add 51% to 40%, we get 91%. That's if we add up the average annual value of what AEW gets from Turner, which is $43 million, $44 million in a year, compared to WWE getting $470 million in a year for both Raw and SmackDown between Fox and NBC Universal. If you put all that money into one bucket, WWE is getting 91% of that. I don't know what NXT is getting. I don't believe it's very much. But WWE is getting 91% of the wrestling money that's handed out by television networks. Maybe more than that if NXT is getting something. But WWE is not producing 91% of the watch time. They're producing 72% of the watch time, which leads us to an argument that AEW is probably undervalued, which is understandable given how new of a brand it is and how new those programs are. But what we are looking ahead to, and this negotiation period probably starts in the latter part of next year, where WWE's 2 contracts in the U.S., TV contracts, they will expire September 2024. AEW's contract will expire December 2023 with a 1-year option at the choice of Warner Media, which may be Warner Media Discovery by then. Warner Media can extend that contract to December 2024. I think they will, be my guess. And then we'll have a negotiation period that'll probably happen between the latter part of next year, 2022, and the early part of 2023. And if prior rounds of TV negotiations are any indication, then we will see an announcement sometime, maybe the spring of 2023 for WWE, maybe a little bit later for AEW, considering that their deal expires about a quarter later. And if I were to guess, I think WWE is still in a good position to grow their media rights value. I don't know if they'll double it. I don't think they'll triple it. Wouldn't be my guess at this point. But probably grow their media rights value as Nick Khan completes another deal for them. And I would imagine that AEW gets a raise at a higher factor, still less money in total, probably less money per hour than WWE. But the revenue that these companies generate, massive difference between them by about 10x right now between WWE and AEW. Still a large difference between them in the TV round going forward from let's say 5 years from 2024. So let's say 2024, 2029. That margin gets somewhat smaller with WWE still well in the lead if all things remain equal. So that's the outlook from the Wrestlenomics headquarters this evening. And I guess that's all for this week. And I will talk to you this weekend. We will be doing a live Wrestlenomics radio Sunday morning, probably about 9 a.m. as the Bills play at home. So Chris Gull and I have to wake up early and do Wrestlenomics radio. We'll be doing it live, of course, on YouTube, and then it'll be in your podcast app afterward. Where's the image for that? There's the image for that. Hit like and share. Hit the thumbs up, and that helps people discover Wrestlenomics Radio. If you think more people should be watching Wrestlenomics and listening to Wrestlenomics and reading Wrestlenomics, hit the like button, share it, subscribe if you haven't already. This program is on every Thursday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. No matter what time zone you're in, it's live around the world. You can subscribe to Patreon, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, and get access to my TV ratings reports that come out nearly every weekday, including this day one came out. You get access to the Wrestlenomics viewership spreadsheet, which includes more than 20,000 data points, the backlog, the almanac of wrestling television ratings. you get access to that. You get access to audio of this program, which will be coming out shortly for patrons, and more. You can follow me on Twitter at Brandon Thurston, at Wrestlenomics. You go to the Wrestlenomics Discord channel on the Post Wrestling Discord. And that's all for now. Thanks for supporting Wrestlenomics for another year. This will be the last time I'm going to talk to anybody until Sunday, which will be January. It'll be 2022. Thanks for supporting Wrestlenomics this year. We've done a lot of things, a lot of growth here. Gotten supercomputers, super laptop. I've learned Python. We are continuing to unlock the power of automation in the Wrestlenomics headquarters, and we will continue to do that. But yeah, thanks to everybody for their support and for following and subscribing and listening and watching. And we're going to continue to grow and provide quality analysis